Hello, everyone.
Good
Hello.
evening.
Good to see you.
Wonderful to see you. Welcome.
Hi, Lynn. I think that's Lynn from India or Lynn
Hi.
from the world, as we
Lynn
know.
from Love. Yes.
It's good to see your image there, Lynn.
Hello,
Thank
Lynn.
you. Hello.
Thank you for traveling all the way to Canada tonight with us, or this morning, early morning for you.
It's easy. It's just the mind.
That's great. That's great. So, welcome, Margaret. It's nice to have you with
Good
us
to see you,
tonight, and
Margaret and
Janet,
Janet.
and Fern, and Sam, and the man behind the unity symbol.
Mystery Man.
That's Garrett. So, welcome, everyone. Everyone doing okay?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, nice to see you.
Good.
Good to see you. Very good to see you.
Here comes Gord. Usually takes a few minutes for people to arrive, but they get here in good time. So, welcome to the people who are new. And I'm wondering, Lil, maybe you could give a little bit of the, just a couple minutes of the history of the spiritual principles that we're going through. We have 13 spiritual principles or of activism that we're going through in this course. And last week we um, talked about three of those principles, four of those principles, and tonight we'll talk about three more. And we're opening the course with a little bit of music from different spiritual activist movements across regions and time and all of that. So tonight we'll open with some music. And what I'm inviting here too is, and there will be some group time for everyone to really dive into each of these principles of how they are resonate with you, how they are in your life, um, or don't resonate with you, whatever. So, and then we'll kind of come in and out of group and talk about these things. Um, and if you prefer not to be in a group, just send a chat to Garrett behind the unity symbol. And during that time, you could journal. So the people on YouTube, for example, if you're watching in, during the time of our group time, we just encourage you to take some personal time and journal, or just reflect on these principles in your own life. But since we have a couple new people here that weren't with us last week, I'm thinking maybe, Will, you could do just a few minutes of the history of these principles, so to bring everyone up to date again.
Just very briefly, and welcome, Stella. Good to see you. Sure, I'll say just a few words because I think many of you have heard this before. All right.
Mute to the phones.
Turn it off. There we go.
There we go. Both of them off now. Here comes Myra. We'll just keep people are coming in, coming in.
So, welcome, Myra. Good to see you. So, the history of these principles. Well, first of all, the essence of these principles is that if we're going to be an effective instrument for social change and social activism, we need to do some spiritual work. We need to clean ourselves inwardly. We need to transform the foundation from which we are coming in order to be the most effective instrument. So that's the essence of what this is about. And I'll say more about, we're going to talk about the Martin Luther King principles. But that's really how this got started. And the quote that I like to use is from Meister Eckhart, who said the outer work can never be great if the inner work is small. And the outer work can never be small if the inner work is great. So if we do a great inner work, then whatever we do outwardly, even though it may not be recognized by the world as great, it has a greatness. It carries, as it says across the scriptures, but I'm thinking of the Bhagavad Gita right now, which says in every act of selfless service, the eternal Brahman Supreme is present. So when we act from a place of genuine connection to service and to serving others, God, Him herself, is there doing the action through us. And the essence is to clear ourselves and to empty ourselves, to be that instrument. And that takes some effort. And if we don't do it, we can find that we'll be trapped by all manner of the ego's games. And so, and some of the examples we'll be giving as we go through the course relate to those and some of those false identifications and all of that. So by way of history, as Cynthia asked me to outline, very briefly, these principles got started when I was working as an environmental activist back in the mid-90s. And it was actually during the Clinton and Gore administration in the United States. And I got invited to be, to facilitate a remarkable group of senior government officials in Washington, D.C., who were involved in the government at various levels. And the reason I got invited was because I was also an environmentalist, but one who had also a spiritual practice and some years of depth in that arena. And so I was a kind of seen as a bridge, and they were looking to bridge that inner development with that outer service. And that's how these originally got developed. And the specific request was to develop a set of spiritual principles that didn't mention religion. We don't want any of that, funny business, just the essence of the wisdom. And so I tried to honor that request by sharing what seemed to me to be like the essence of spiritual principles that were important in social activism. And then I think there were originally 8 principles, and then they grew to 12 and then 13. And so anyway, that's how it got started. And we've been working with them for several years, and several other groups have adopted them. So it's a great joy to share these with you in this course.
If you know the Pachamama Alliance Awakening the Dreamer, they use them in their course, and so you may hear about them again there.
That's Lynn Twist and that whole operation.
Yeah. So for those who have just arrived, welcome. And we're going to have an engaged and interactive time together tonight or this morning. Lynn is from India or lives in India, so it's morning time there for her.
No, I'm from Love. That's my
From
identity.
Love. I'm sorry, Lynn. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Because you met me in India, I think you confuse my identity with where you met me. So
Okay, but I did meet you in India, yes?
Yes, that's why I think there is the difficulty to associate me with the identity I share. That
Okay,
I
thank
come
you.
from Love. Thank you.
Well, welcome.
Well,
We're
Thank
happy
you.
you're
I'm
here.
happy to be here.
Yeah.
Well, happy to have you here. And we do see Gandhi there in the background, which is perfect.
Yes. It's
That's
part
Gandhi
of,
is definitely one of our leaders and really one of the most exemplary masters of spiritual activism.
yes.
So
yes.
we're going to start with some music tonight. We were introduced to this music from Dr. Karambu Ringera, who brought it to some of our work. That I've looked up who the original artist is and who created this, and his name is Banjo Joe Crookston, and it appears on his 2004 album called Fall Down as the Rain. He's a folk artist that brings in storytelling, but it's been adopted by many spiritual activists along the way. So I encourage you, as you listen to this, just to let it come into your heart. If you feel like singing along, I think it'll be repetition, so you'll hear the parts again and again, and you can bring it in as you choose to. So without further ado, here we go.
I can feel my heart beat. I can feel my heart beat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. I can feel my heart beat. I can feel my heart beat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. When I say yes to the beat in me. When I say yes to the beat in me. I can set my spirit free. I can set my spirit free. When I say yes to the beat in you. When I say yes to the beat in you. I can see your light shine through. I can see your light shine through. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. When I say yes to the beat in me. When I say yes to the beat in me. I can set my spirit free. I can set my spirit free. When I say yes to the beat in you. When I say yes to the beat in you. I can see your light shine through. I can see your light shine through. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. When I say yes to the beat in me. When I say yes to the beat in me. I can set my spirit free. I can set my spirit free. When I say yes to the beat in you. When I say yes to the beat in you. I can see your light shine through. I can see your light shine through. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. When I say yes to the beat in me. When I say yes to the beat in me. I can set my spirit free. I can set my spirit free. When I say yes to the beat in you. When I say yes to the beat in you. I can see your light shine through. I can see your light shine through. I can feel my heartbeat. I can feel my heartbeat. Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song. 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 Beating to the rhythm of the freedom song.
Isn't that lovely? Yeah. So bringing in music to our life and into movement, spiritual movement and spiritual activism is really important because it awakens all dimensions of who we are. It's not just a head thing. It actually enlivens, inspires, motivates, and as my mentor, Dr. Vincent Harding said, it's like in the freedom movement of the US in the 60s, 50s, 60s, they would lean back into the hands or the arms of God that then they could move forward into their movement on the streets. And the music, every gathering, the music would bring them into connection with one another, into their own heart space, but with one another in community, so they could actually feel the energy, the vibration, the love of spirit, the love of the divine, the love of the ultimate reality, to know that they were guided by that to move out into bringing social justice, bringing spiritual justice into the world. So we're going to move into Will offering up the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's 4 of his principles around activism, spiritual activism as well. And then we'll move into our principles as well.
So as you probably know, Martin Luther King Jr. was inspired strongly by Gandhi and also by some of his mentors, Howard Thurman in the States and others. And he articulated at one point what he called the 4 steps to social change action or activism. And they're very simple, but they're very clear and they have a sequence to them. And the idea is that we need to become an instrument, as I was saying earlier, for that larger force of spirit to work through us. So the 4 steps that he identified, the first one was essentially documenting the injustice. So what happens when we encounter something that needs to be transformed in society, or even in our family, or in our community, or in our organization, wherever it might be. The first thing we need to do is sort of gather the particular details of what's not working. What is the particular injustice that's happening? And what are some examples of it? So that we have very clear data. Not that we're thinking of it as data, but we want to always, when we're going to confront or challenge other human beings around their behavior around or institutions, we need to have concrete examples. So that was the first part, was to basically gather the data, documentation of it. Then the second step is to basically skillfully approach the powers that be that are responsible for the injustice, whatever it might be, and appropriately confront them. Basically bring these data forward and say, this is not working. Look at the consequences of these actions. They're causing this type of suffering, this type of injustice to others, whatever it might be. And so there is this second stage of basically a kind of confrontation with the forces that are responsible for the injustice, and then a kind of negotiation, if they're open to negotiating, if they're open to receiving this feedback and input and working with you who are bringing this forward. Now, what happens frequently is they're not open. Certainly they weren't in the case of the civil rights movement when, Rosa Parks refused to, move her seat in the bus. And when the Black people refused to move from the lunch counters, from the white only lunch counters and all of these kinds of things, the attempt at negotiation failed utterly. In those cases, the powers that be were outraged and did not want to even consider this change. And that was similarly true with the environmental movement. When some of the environmental regulations, some of my colleagues were some of the first who challenged some of the corporations after the environmental laws were passed, after the EPA was founded. And they would take these new laws and regulations to these corporations that were in blatant violation of them, dumping pollution into rivers and oceans. And the response was just laugh them off, just ridiculous. We're not going to, just get out of my office, until they did lawsuits and basically had to take him to court. So there's that first step is to document the injustice. Second step is to take it and really attempt to resolve it with the powers that are responsible for the injustice. Now, when that fails, which it often does, then the third step in Martin Luther King's 4-stage outline was what he called purification. What we would maybe relabel more generally as inner work. And it really has to do with coming to a deep level of cleansing of one's motivations, clarification of them, and doing one's inner work so that one becomes emptied of the anger and outrage, which is usually there as the motivation in the beginning, because the whole nature of injustice is when you first encounter it and experience it, naturally, it creates an outrage. Appropriately, there's that righteous anger, if you will. And there's that outrage of, how could this be? How could this be happening? How could anyone let this be happening? And we must do something. So that's very appropriate. But there's a danger in that moment of being motivated by the ego's ambitions or by the anger itself and going out in an attack mode, which generally is not a very skillful way to proceed in terms of actually trying to change the conditions. So this was the step that Martin Luther King called purification, and we might call the inner work that we've been referring to, which is really doing your inner work and really getting clear about your motivations and really cleansing yourself of those tendencies to blame and project, to take responsibility for your own complicity in certain ways, and then coming from that place of the fourth step now, which is to then move into direct action. That's where you then confront the powers that be with your form of activism, whatever it might be. If it's standing in front of bulldozers that are about to, tear down trees, or if it's, confronting the nuclear industry with their kind of pollution and radioactive waste and destruction there, or racial injustice, whatever it might be. And you're coming now from a place of having connected to an inner spirit, having prayed intensely, having gotten clear about your motivations, having done a certain level of purification, as Martin Luther King called it, of sort of those shadow energies that can come easily into play and take over. And then you can become a much more effective agent of social change and transformation, and really opening yourself to the guidance of spirit. So that's the essence of what Martin Luther King described as what he called the 4 steps to direct action. And one thing I'll just add, last piece, is that some of you may have come across his own personal reflections on his journey to nonviolence. He studied Gandhi and some of Gandhi's mentors. And he was very, very impressed with Gandhi, who he at one point said was a greater Christian than any other Christian he knew, which is a beautiful thing to say about Gandhi. But then he found that he encountered a whole philosophy of Reinhold Niebuhr. And Reinhold Niebuhr is a Protestant theologian, brilliant. And he wrote a very remarkable book, which was an analysis of human evil, called Moral Man, Immoral Society. I think it was published in the mid-30s, 36, 37, somewhere in there. And basically what the thesis of that book was that in groups, human beings are capable of unspeakable evils that no member of that group would do on their own. That there was a herd effect, if you will, and that the composition of the group, the morality of each person was such that no one of these people on their own would do some of these heinous acts. But when they came into a collective, the shadow would be amplified, and there would be a collective evil that was capable of being done through groups that, again, no one member of that group would do on their own. And that is a very compelling analysis, and he had lots of data, and he analyzed the Nazis. And when Martin Luther King encountered this, he really was challenged. And he writes about this, and I think it's an article called My Pilgrimage to Nonviolence. And he writes about how he was really obstructed, because Reinhold Niebuhr is really good. I mean, his insights are excellent. And he recognized and very, astutely analyzed the nature of human evil and how those heinous things can be done in the collective. But to make a long story short, Martin Luther King documents how he really grappled with this, because it challenged his whole belief of really even Christian love is the answer kind of thing, and the whole conviction that Gandhi's activism was the way forward. And then he had a major aha, in which he realized that Reinhold Niebuhr had missed something absolutely essential. And that was what Martin Luther King called the cure of grace. And the cure of grace was really the power of the collective motivated around love. So just as it was true that there is an unspeakable evil when the collective shadow is activated, there's also an unspeakable, unstoppable power of love that can also move through the collective. And this was what King called the cure of grace, that there can be a mastery and then a power that the collective and the individual are basically becoming instruments of divine will and divine love. And that creates the force of love for social change, which in King's view is unstoppable. And he basically declared this Niebuhr completely missed. And so he went forward with that conviction and basically conducted all of his civil rights activism on that foundation. And of course, as we know, with remarkable success. So I think that's very important, because the power of evil and darkness is not to be denied. and should never be minimized. We must recognize that it's a real force in the world, but it is no match for the power of love ultimately, and for the power of love working through the collective. And we must hold that faith and that conviction and invoke and invite that. And that means each of us doing our own inner work and then aligning with those with whom we have shared values, and then doing that movement for creating that world that our hearts know is possible. So that's the summary of those kind of steps of Martin Luther King's activism.
Thank you, Will.
Sure.
So we're going to move into the first principle. We have 3 tonight from the 13 spiritual principles of activism. And I'll share that in a moment, and then we will on the screen, and then I'll share a little story, and then we'll move into some group time, or if you prefer to journal, especially on YouTube there, you can do that. So let me share the screen here and look at this first principle. Don't demonize your adversaries. Ooh, how easy is that in these days, huh? Jetsun Matinsampolmo, who is one of our friends, teachers, mentors, says even Mr. Trump has Buddha nature. So as we look at, every sentient being on this earth has Buddha nature in some form. And so finding that place where we can recognize that. And Martin Luther King said, he told even those that were violent against him and the people of the freedom movement, he said, I love you, but I don't like your behavior. Basically, real simple. We're trying to change behavior here, but I still love you as a creature on this planet, a creature from the divine, a Buddha, in your own right. So what's this mean? Let's see if I can get my slide to work here. There we go. So doing so will only make them more defensive and less receptive to your views. People respond to arrogance with their own arrogance, creating rigid polarization. Be a perpetual learner and constantly challenge your own views. So Garrett's going to put that in the chat box for you. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen and share you a little story, small story, my own life. And this might relate to some of you here. You may have family members who have very different political views than you, and I surely do. In the heart of Missouri, my family who are Pentecostal Christians and rural kind of country folk, they are very much Trump supporters. They are very much fundamentalist Christians. And it's been a dance throughout my life around how to be in even conversation. Will's been very good with my uncle, actually, who is a Pentecostal minister. And they can talk scripture together and agree on a lot unless they got into the deeper kind of esoteric factors of it, and then it could all go astray. So finding that balance of where we can actually love the other person and or the situation, find that humanity in another person without demonizing them, finding where those areas are that we can uplift our family members or people out in the world. When I watch the news, for example, it's very easy as I watch the news to start getting an us them kind of feel with things and putting them as the bad people that don't carry my own beliefs. I've appreciated Van Jones, if any of you have seen him. He's in the US, a prominent media person now, but he was also on the cabinet of Obama for a short time. There's a whole story behind that, but I've appreciated him because he's tried to get into the shoes, try to get to understand the people who don't or have very different belief systems than he does, or some of us have. And so to really step into the other person's shoes and understand them with a sense of curiosity and a sense of learning about where they're coming from. And that's what I've had to do with my family. We're on Facebook together, and some of my family members have defriended some of the evangelical Christian Pentecostal family members because they just don't want to see their post. And I can understand that and appreciate that. And that's an important aspect of taking care of ourselves. But I personally have chosen to find ways to just kind of let their posts bounce off of me. We talked about that last time, of how therapists can kind of let it flow through them, or like a rubber ball coming at you where it might hit you, but it bounces off if it comes to you, and not taking it in, not letting it trigger us or charge us, but to actually become an instrument of thy peace, as St. Francis would say, and for that deeper understanding, which is also the prayer of St. Francis of, Lord, what is the peace?
Oh, you mean
The second part of the prayer.
yeah, grant that I may
Grant
not
that I,
so much.
yeah, seek to be consoled as to console, to understand, to be understood as to understand, and to be loved as to love. And so to really, how do we engage that in our spiritual lives, in our lives? How do we embrace those who have different opinions to us and not demonize them, but actually come to a place of really trying to live out that St. Francis prayer of a deeper understanding, so that we become a we and we stay unified and hold each other. And hold the place of, I can love someone, but I might not like their behavior. And that's a really important lesson. So it's not becoming a doormat or giving up your own values, but not being so staunch in my position that I am so rigid, I become a fundamentalist in my own right, right? So we're going to move into some groups right now and have a little time. Garrett, what size groups do we have?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. What's that?
Oh, you're not doing the next principle?
No, we're just doing one
Oh.
at a time.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
And so we'll move into this principle. And as you go into your group, just share the time. Garrett will give you some time markers and share about how this resonates with you or doesn't. You might have an example in your own life that you want to bring forward. And it's not really a time to to give advice. If someone asks for suggestions, that's one thing. But just listen, deep listening to each other and holding space for each other. Okay, any questions, or are we good to go? Everyone good? Okay. And if you're on YouTube and you'd like to just journal and have some reflection time, Garrett's going to put the slide up there for you. We'll see you in a little while.
See you in a few minutes.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back.
We're arriving back on the scene here. Some of you a little sooner than others. We hope that was a fruitful conversation. Welcome back to the YouTube people. We'll wait a moment for everyone else to arrive. Silence is good. Hello, hello. Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
We're going to share by the way, we're going to share the next principle. And at the end of all this, we'll have a little bit of time. Our plan is to have some time to come back full plenary and be able to harvest a bit, integrate them all. So yeah. So here we go with the next one. So that's the one we just saw. Here's the next one. You are unique. How many people believe that? Yay, that's it. Find and fulfill your true calling. It is better to tread your own path, however humbly, than that of another, however successfully. From the Bhagavad Gita. Each one of us has a unique song to sing in the symphony of life. Discover yours and sing out with confidence, joy, and abandon. The harmony parts will take care of themselves. So again, Garrett's going to put that in your chat box. And as you think about you are unique, I wonder how many of us have maybe not felt that all our lives, or maybe a little part of us comes up and at different times, as it does in my life, and I go, I'm not very good at that, or, I feel less capable or less skilled or less, I'm comparing myself with others and thinking that I need to be as brilliant or as creative or as skilled as they are in that area, not recognizing that I have everything that God's given me in my area to develop and continue to evolve into. And that's a lifelong thing, it doesn't matter what age you are, it's that evolution of our whole being that is always present for us. So one example from my life, and you can be thinking about your life here as we go along. One example was when I was just finished my master's degree in gerontology, wellness management and gerontology. And I had been basically my entire daughter's life. She was a teenager by that point. I had been in school. That's the only way she knew of her mom, was a full-time student working at jobs, but going to school and doing my thing. And my children, I was a single mom. My children had just lived that life of, us living kind of on a shoestring, macaroni and cheese and canned green beans kind of thing a lot, but we had a beautiful life, I thought. When it came time to find a job, I was offered 2 positions, one in a corporation that paid a lot of money, was middle management, was a really prestigious job in many ways, gave me a big office, gave me all, in fact, I showed my dad a picture of the office and he said, yes, that's great. It's kind of like you made it, And then I had this other job that was working in a community where it was doing programs kind of on a social service level, community, a lot less pay, and in a small localized place. And so I consulted with different people.
The job offer, you mean?
Job offer, yeah. I consulted with different family members and friends, and there was one family member that said to me, Cynthia, your children have sacrificed. They have given all, they haven't had TV, they haven't had all the luxuries of life. You really need to go for that corporate job and make the money And then you can donate your money toward all these charities that you want. And I thought, wow. And I will admit that I was in my, I guess I was 40 at that time, maybe 39. And I was fearful. This was the first time I was stepping out into the world. So there was some fear in me of which job to take. But this had a big impact on me for this family member to say to me, you need to give your children what they deserve. And you can give your money to charity. So I decided to do that and take that job. Well, as it unfolded, I knew pretty quickly I wasn't in the right place. It wasn't where my heart was. And I wasn't even getting to spend much time with my kids because I was having to travel and commute, and I was paying more for childcare than I was, giving them any luxuries of life. And it was actually that job that led to that sexual harassment that you all have heard about. Now, I'm not saying that I wasn't in the right place. Maybe I was in the perfect place. Maybe that was God's intention for me to go through all that. But what I will say is I didn't follow my own heart's knowing. I went with someone else's that had an impact and an influence on me to such a degree that I trusted that more, and that person's advice more than my own wisdom and knowing of where I needed to be. All is well. I'm in a good place. I went through what I needed to go through, but that's an example of just not recognizing my own uniqueness and my own level of knowing and wisdom within myself, and not following my own dharma at that time, perhaps. It wasn't where my heart was, at least. So we're going to put you into your groups again. Garrett's put it in the chat box, and for the YouTube folks, we'll have it up on the screen of what this one is. And just find your way of whatever feels right for you to share in your small groups. Again, you'll have about 15 minutes in your small group, just like you had this last time. And you'll be in different forms now. You'll be with different people. So here we go again. Any questions, or are we good? All right, we'll see you shortly. Thank you, Lynn. Great thumbs up.
You're welcome. I have to thank Zoom for it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, here we go.
See you soon.
See you in a few minutes.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Not everyone yet,
Oh, not yet. Right.
almost everyone.
Getting there. Did they float off?
I think your group just decided to punch the button before seconds disappeared.
Yeah,
Right?
the 54 seconds.
Yeah.
Up to 54 seconds.
Yes.
They're lost in Zoom space.
There they
There they
come.
come.
Yay.
There. We're found from Zoom space.
You don't want to leave each other, that's all. You like each other too much.
It feels like they're paragliding back into this room.
That's nice.
it.
Well, I guess
Well
for,
put.
for me, we keep both sessions waiting until we're kicked out, right?
That's it. That's it.
So we're going to do one more principle tonight, and then we'll have a time to harvest. And we're going to close with a little practice that's related to this principle. So this, are you going to do this one?
No, you're going to do it,
Okay.
and I'm going to show it. So here it comes.
So this one is classic, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself, even when thy neighbor is an identified enemy. Now, maybe even if you don't hold them as an enemy, they might hold you that way. And so sometimes we don't have any enemies, but others have made us their enemy. So this principle, love thy enemies, or at least have compassion for them. That's really the important practice, is to begin to develop compassion for the other, and through that to transform the relationship that may be challenging. And this is a vital challenge for our times. This does not mean indulging falsehood or corruption. It means moving from us, them thinking to we consciousness, from separation to cooperation, recognizing that we human beings are ultimately far more alike than we are different. This is challenging in situations with people whose views are radically opposed to yours. So be hard on the issues, soft on the people. So this is obviously an important principle, particularly at a time of polarization, which we're certainly experiencing now in the political and social domain, and with all of the unrest that's emerged lately. And I want to just give an example of a colleague who practiced this very effectively in a highly charged situation. And this was back when I was working with that group of politicians that I mentioned in Washington, D.C. And one of them was a very senior person at the Environmental Protection Agency, and was actually in a position of the deputy directorship for the whole agency. So she was very senior. And there was someone in the Department of, I believe it was Energy, who was very opposed to her. And there was this major conflict they had. And this person who was opposing her was powerful and kind of charismatic and carried a lot of weight. And so in these different meetings that she was engaged in, there was this kind of process of intimidation that was going on. That's what she was experiencing. And it was really creating a lot of challenge and stress for her. I'm sure that you've probably had those situations sometimes in your life. I have, where there's someone who is really opposed to what you're about, or what position you're taking. I remember when I was an environmental scientist having that debating, and in various hearings and policy meetings and hearings at Congress and World Bank and other forums, conferences, where I was pitted against some of the advocates for nuclear power, for example, as a strategy for abating global warming. And I was advocating for solar energy and renewable energy. And there was a strong tension at times. And I really had to practice this, learning how to hold my adversary in my heart, holding holding an outcome that would be mutually beneficial for all of us, while also directly challenging the views that were being espoused by my opponent. So my opponent was not my enemy, but we were in a polarized situation in which decisions were made based on the evidence that we presented, or supposedly. Sometimes we presented all the evidence and the decision seemed to go against what evidence would suggest because there were political factors involved. But it was a very important training to learn how to not be so identified with the position that I was taking, that a critique of the position I was taking would be perceived as an attack on me. Of course, sometimes it was, sometimes it would move to an ad hominem attack. And that happens sometimes. And then one has to practice that psychic aikido that we talked about last time, allowing that negative energy to pass through you. But it's also very important that we don't develop ours, that we watch our own energies and that we don't develop an attacking modality when we are challenging an opposing position. And there is a capacity that one can develop where you're actually standing for a particular outcome while also holding the best interests of everyone involved. So there's a way in which you can be holding your opponent in your heart while also seeking a particular outcome that you feel is a better outcome. And it's a very important skill to develop in becoming a social and spiritual activist. And it's really not getting so identified with your position that you see your opponent as an enemy, but that you maintain that commitment to loving this person, regardless of how they behave, and to trying as much as possible to see things from their point of view. So back to my story. So this activist had this very challenging adversary within the government. And so we taught a practice of Tonglen, which we're going to end with this evening. Tonglen is a Tibetan practice for essentially transmuting negative energy into love and positive energy. And it's an ancient practice developed in Tibet. It's not unique to them. I mean, there are forms of it in other traditions, but it's well articulated in the Tibetan tradition. And our mentors, particularly Tenzin Palmo, has taught it frequently. And so anyway, back in the 90s, that was one of the practices that we taught. And in our series of retreats for these environmental politicians. So anyway, this woman from the EPA, she actually then went and began to practice Tonglen with this adversary in these government hearings. And she came back a few months later and was just elated and reported a remarkable transformation. She said that at first it was very difficult and it seemed almost artificial. She was, sitting there practicing this practice, which we'll do in a few minutes after we come back again, which is really breathing in that negativity, but then transmuting it, breathing it into the fire of the heart and incinerating it in your own heart and breathing back out love. And essentially transmuting that negativity. And she did this all by herself, just in her own private little consciousness. Nothing changed with him. She never confronted this man outwardly. But what happened was, over the next several weeks, is that the nature of their dynamic shifted because she transformed her side in it, her involvement in it, her engagement in it, because she was so intimidated and she was resisting it. And so, what you resist persists. And so she was actually playing unconsciously and unintentionally a role in exacerbating that tension. And she consciously began to transmute it and began to work with this adversary out of a place of, first of all, commitment to end this kind of polarizing tension and also to liberate herself, really. I mean, so that she could be more effective. But what happened over time, took a few weeks, was that whole dynamic with this man began to shift. quite dramatically. And the whole tension of that kind of enmity that seemed to be present in the room began to be dissolved. And she began to feel freer and able to be herself more. And he began to seem to listen and not always opposing her at every step. And so what happened was that whole relationship was transmuted. And then later, just one little addendum, we did the holotropic breathwork at one point, and during that session, she had an experience of him and his pain. She actually had an empathic identification with his pain and where he was coming from and what had happened to him as a child that created the world and way of engaging the world that he did. And so she had this whole compassionate awakening. Again, he was never involved. She never said anything to him, but she had this whole awakening to the reality of his psyche. And so that only deepened her capacity to have empathy for him and further liberated her from this challenging relationship. So that's a little story about how actively taking responsibility for embracing and holding your adversary with a love. And again, like Cynthia said earlier, you can love them without liking them or without, condoning negative behavior. But as Martin Luther King said, that I will never allow someone's behavior, no matter how despicable, to reduce me to the point of hatred. That's the key. That you don't stoop to hatred even with very challenging people and toxic people, but you continue to hold that space for them, recognizing as best you can that they have a life experience and some kind of wounding that is causing them to be in that place. As it has been said, hurt people hurt other people. And so they've been hurt in some way, and you want to be holding a space to help transmute that, even while not receiving or accepting their injury as if it's okay. It's not okay. So it's a challenging place to be in, but the Tonglen practice helps, and we'll go through that in a few minutes. So we're going to move into small groups again and really invite you to share about this practice, and particularly maybe times when you've been challenged, to hold that place of compassion and love for someone who's really pretty difficult or creating difficult challenge for you.
So without further ado, Garrett's going to move you into your spaces now, and probably with some new people. I don't know how much mixing up he can do. And the YouTube people, we can have you journaling or just doing some reflection on your own.
And we'll see you in a few minutes.
All right, here we go.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see
So
you.
before we have a chance to do some kind of just collective harvesting, let's just take a few minutes to practice this practice called Tonglen. It's a very simple practice. And it's basically developed, the articulation of it is from Tibetan Buddhism, this particular one, but it's a way of dissolving that tightness in our hearts that comes when we're in some kind of opposition or when we are experiencing someone who's suffering and we want to be a support and even an instrument to help transmute that suffering. So there's a lot of ways it can be applied. If someone is in struggling or something, you can work with this to help release them without even their necessarily even knowing that you're doing it. Also, if you're feeling some challenge in yourself with someone who's really triggering you, this can help you to transmute your own relationship to the situation and awaken compassion for that person, again, without them even having to know. So it's a way of both transmuting the suffering of someone else or one's own suffering, either way, and replacing that with a genuine kind of love, energy, and compassion. So just gently closing your eyes for a moment, or having a soft gaze to the keyboard, and just taking a couple of deep breaths, and just allowing yourself to center, coming into that place of inner stillness and openness. And in Tibetan Buddhism, this is called coming into a place of absolute bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is that loving kindness energy, that universal agape, if you will, of the heart. That spiritual love that is in all of our hearts for all beings. And just opening to the spaciousness and the clarity of that energy. And now allowing to do this practice, allowing someone who's suffering, who you know is suffering in some way. I'm thinking of someone right now who's going into surgery on Wednesday and has some fear and concern about it. So I'm thinking of this friend. And I'm going to breathe in that anxiety. And there's a concern when I breathe in someone else's challenging energy or negativity that I might be then taking on that negativity. And that is an important question to have. And what you do is you don't breathe it in the way that I'm going to absorb it, but you breathe it into the fire of the heart, into the flame of love that is burning in your heart. This is important. So I'm feeling that flame of love that burns always in my heart. And as I breathe in this suffering of this other person, I visualize it literally being incinerated in that fire of love. And in traditional Tibetan practice, they might even encourage you to visualize that suffering as a kind of dense, dark cloud, maybe even with a sense of heaviness and obscurity. And you actually breathe it in directly to your heart center. But you can, what the practice here is to imagine it then basically being incinerated and burned away. Not by you, but by the divine fire of love that's in your heart and by that intentionality. And so you breathe in completely. And as you breathe in, you're also breathing in the breath that fuels that fire and makes that fire burn hotter and brighter. And so that all the more effectively incinerates this suffering. And on the out breath, breathing in that brighter light and fire of love and warmth of love out to this person. So on the in-breath, breathing in that anxiety, that suffering, that difficulty, that fear, whatever it might be, that form of suffering that this other person is experiencing. And on the out breath, visualizing that suffering as it comes in, being incinerated by the flame of love in your heart. And on the out breath, breathing out that light and that warmth of love. And as you continue with this practice, you can imagine your entire body breathing in this challenging energy and that flame of love, burning and incinerating it, and then breathing out this love and healing energy through every pore of your body, not just through your heart, but every cell of your body is a miniature heart, like a grand fractal of divine love. And so each cell is also burning with that love and can contribute to the incineration of that negative energy. And so your entire body becomes a vessel breathing out love and light to this person. And now in this practice, there's generally a practice of breathing in the same suffering from anyone else who's experiencing that same kind of suffering. And then on the out breath, extending your love and light to all those who are in the same situation as your friend, those who are also experiencing this type of suffering, so that you're not limiting it to this person, because you are drawing on the unlimited universal and ultimately infinite power of divine love, or bodhicitta as it's called in Tibetan Buddhism. And so now just breathing in the anxiety, the fear, the suffering of those who have a similar suffering to the one that you're doing this practice for your friend. Breathing in that challenging energy, visualizing it coming into the heart area and being burned, completely incinerated in that fire of love, becoming fuel to make that fire even hotter and brighter. And then breathing out that love and breathing out that warmth and light, and allowing that warmth and light to come through every pore of your being, pouring back to your friend, this person who's suffering, and pouring out to all those who are in a similar suffering. And finally, allowing someone perhaps who's an adversary or has some kind of challenging dynamic with you, or that you feel a challenge with, and just breathing in that person's suffering with no agenda here, with no attempt to win any kind of struggle that you may be in with this person, but simply recognizing that this person is suffering. And you're breathing in that suffering, and you're visualizing it being transmuted by the fire of love. Not your love, but your heart is a seat of God's love. And allowing that suffering to be incinerated, to be burned away in the fire of God's love, which is burning in your heart. And on the out breath, just sending that love and light to this person with no agenda, no attachments to outcome, but simply because they too are a soul incarnated on this earth, doing the best they can. And notice as you do this, how it also liberates you. It helps you to be in that place of love and light. It helps to burn away some of your suffering as you do this practice for others. And so, as it is said, you are twice blessed when you practice this way. It blesses those for whom you're practicing, and it blesses you as the practitioner, as is always the case with love. It gives to those who give love. Love gives those who give love, gives to those who give love. And finally, now giving thanks to the source of that love, to God or to Dharmakaya, that infinite supreme source of all love and light throughout the cosmos. That source which is our deepest identity, and giving deep gratitude to that supreme source within us. And as you're ready, gently opening your eyes or returning back to this collection of rectangles, the contemporary sacred form of gathering now, where we are a rectangle among rectangles, all made of light. It's a good reminder that we're all made of light.
Maybe we could make them into circles next time.
That'd be
Yeah,
nice.
that would be nice. Yeah.
Mandalas.
Mandalas. Yeah.
So thank you, Will. That was beautiful. Very nice. We want to give a little space. We have probably about 5 minutes or so just to share a little bit, harvest a little bit from your sharings, or maybe from the meditation that you just went through. So whatever's on your heart that you'd like to share.
I wanted to just share a couple of things. One of the things reminded me when it says love your enemies. My mom also used that expression, love your enemies, because it drives them nuts.
That's beautiful.
And I always remember that. I thought that was it's always practical. Remember that when you're in that. The other thing is I was on I wanted to share with you, I was just on an 1.5-hour call with Jack Kornfield and the fellow who created Social Dilemma.
Oh, right.
Oh,
And so I would encourage everybody to go to humanetech.com and just become a subscriber and support these guys, because really what they're after is identifying the cause of divisiveness in the States. And it's come around, it's taken a long time. It's taken 10 years to get to where we are, but it's really because people are listening to totally different feeds, and they're getting totally different social realities. So, and most of the stuff that they talked about encompasses all this stuff, is like, don't see the other guy. In fact, as an interesting thing for those of us who have family in the States, he came up with an interesting thing for Thanksgiving. He said, especially if you have a Republican and Democrat, is exchange phones and look at your social media links and then have a discussion.
Oh, that's nice.
Because they're going to be different.
That's very nice.
could you tell
That's
me?
brilliant. I actually, a friend recommended that to us, and we were sorry to miss it. So we'll go check it out because it's recorded, isn't it?
It's recorded. You had to pay to there was over 2,000 people on it, by the way, apparently.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's Humane Tech, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't have Netflix. I think the movie's on, or the special is on that link. Yeah, humanetech.com.
Very important
Yeah.
movie. It's
Can you
about,
spell that?
oh,
Could you say the name, spell the humane part?
HUMANE,
Oh,
as in you, human with an E on it.
okay. Humane
Tech,
tech.com.
TECH.
Yeah.
.com.
That's beautiful.
And they have a bunch of podcasts. Interestingly enough, by the way, just to continue on, apparently the person in Taiwan is setting up, she's obviously really bright. They've got a podcast on her, and they've set up something so they can develop a social media structure which supports a larger perspective of how we want to be. And it's obviously working over there because at the COVID level, they basically have, they got a functioning society. So this is.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Terry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Anyone else? By the way, we will email you the principles. And if I think I have everyone's email except Francis and maybe Bill's. Bill's, I'm not sure if we have used. I know we have Myra's. I think I have everyone else's. So Francis, if you want to send that to me privately on the chat, if you'd like. Or Garrett, do we have a way to share those on the chat box?
I could put the link to the book in the chat box.
Oh, why don't we do that? And then the page number too, that'd be helpful. And then that'll solve the problem. I don't even have to do it.
So any other reflections or comments from your small groups or any questions that emerged?
Well, I just want to say that Frances Ann is my sister and she goes by Ann.
Oh, okay,
Oh.
Ann.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I forwarded her the information to link up tonight. But yeah, but she can send you or write her email in the chat too. Yeah.
Well, Garrett just posted a link to, which is a book. It's a nice book. And then the page number will give you the actual section of the principles. So you can do that too. It's a free book online.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else?
Yeah, I think for me, just being in the space, sharing and listening, it's brought up like a lot of, I'd say, like emotional pain. Like physically, I don't feel pain, but I think emotionally it's brought up a lot of pain. And it's easy, I feel sometimes, to talk about, like Trump's policies or other policies which are a violation of human rights, in just like to talk about it. But like if you actually sense into it, there is a lot of pain that it has caused a lot of people, like a lot of children at the borders and a lot of families that are separated and a lot of children who were not able to recognize their parents when they were reunited. And that's horrible trauma. And it's not just the US in the sense, these policies, they are then picked up by spaces which are quote unquote right wing across the world, like for instance, you were talking about India, and in India there was a policy where, this was sort of going to be implemented, and luckily a lot of people protested and students came out on the streets, and that was tough because also like many people lost their lives and many people were jailed, and but it was a fight that I think people felt they needed to have, because it became, about excluding only people who are Muslim, or it was understood as that. And some of the right-wing groups were saying that no, we don't mean that, but those who were reading into it knew that this meant that the constitution may be changed, or just the basic policies based on which, the humane principles are going to change. So I feel like there is like some pain that I sense into now, and it's not easy. I think it's important to sit with it, because sometimes when we speak, it's all like verbal, and it's sort of, it's just like it's talking. And I think it's really important to like not jump over this into the next thing that I do, but to just stay with like what's here and what's come up for me. And right now I also feel like like those of you who can see my picture, like beside Gandhi there are two other people there, and the person on the left name is Sushant, and the person on the right, her name is Disha. And these are two people that, you know, they've had deaths recently, and it's being called in one case it's being called an accident, in one case it's being called a suicide, but like we know that it wasn't, you know. And this is sort of happening now a lot, where people like who are not like dying by choice, it's being called you know, an accident or a suicide. And I feel like even within the communities where I work in like mental health through movement, it almost feels like our work as justice workers or our work as mental health workers is being misused, because there are certain sections which are just trying to put a spin on this. And like they say that they talk about mental health awareness, but it's actually denying somebody their rights, and, you know, calling like a killing a suicide. And so this is something that I'm part of right now, and a lot of other young people are part of. And it's a place, like an emotional space again for me, because in a world sense, like none of us are connected, you know, but in another sense, in a spiritual sense, we're all one family. And it's like losing family, and it's losing a part of your heart, and like not knowing, you know, some days like how to deal with that. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we are one, and that there is no other way. And yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
So important what you're saying and bringing forward. And we all need to, I mean, this course is a lot of talking, but you're right. How do we practice? How do we walk the talk? How do we bring it into our life and not just walk away from here and go to the next thing, like you say? How do we make it our practice, right? And just, I just appreciate you speaking the truth of what you're living right now or experiencing in your life and the people you're working with. And also to recognize that we live in different areas of the world, and nothing happens in a vacuum, right? That connection of all of us together, we are one. And when something happens, like you said, in one part of the world, the US, it has a huge impact on another part, especially when that power differential is there. And so just really appreciate you bringing that forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lynn. And just want to check in with how you're feeling right now, because I can feel your heaviness of your heart.
Yeah, a little better. I think I needed to say that, because
Yeah.
you know, on a regular day, sometimes we don't sense into our pain as well. Like, because as sometimes as activists, you just go about your day,
Right.
and you know, you just have to put your sort of activist head on, and you keep the crying for later. And I think today was a day when I could just feel everything, and I needed to say it, you know, and just to acknowledge that it's yeah, there is a cascading effect sometimes
There
of
is.
certain policies across the world, and it's really important to make sure that we do our best, and this doesn't happen. Like,
Well, that's very, very true. And that's, you know, one of the tragedies. That's one of the tragedies of some of these dysfunctional policies, because they do sort of support other similar forces of darkness to rise around the world. And I also want to say what you said about, you know, carrying that pain even as you're working to alleviate it. I mean, and we also, in the work that we do, that Cynthia and I do, we've experienced that times. You know, we do this gender equity and reconciliation work that you've been part of. And sometimes the stories are just so horrific. And we've come back sometimes and needed to do kind of very weepy, and just needed to do a whole sense of cleansing and clearing, even though we're doing that while we're doing the work. But sometimes, you know, it's just so much. There's so much injustice and violation, and there's a need to kind of go into retreat and kind of do that clearing and that cleansing, so that we can come back into the field and continue to serve.
And it's important for all of us to, when things come up, to let our tears come, to pound the pillow and let the anger come, to do what, to let that go so we don't take it out on others. We don't project it onto others or out into the streets and just cause more harm. So that's what I welcome your tears and your feelings with that, Lynn, too, and everyone else's, because it
Yeah,
does start
thank you.
mounting.
Thank you. My voicing teacher, she says tears are like songs
Yeah,
and they are like rivers and they're meant to flow. So,
that's beautiful. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Very true.
Thank you for listening. I didn't expect actually to have this come up for me here right now, but I'm perfectly at peace that it's come up in this gathering, and thank you for listening.
That's great. That's great. And so we're going to need to bring closure. And Lynn, I have your email, so I'll check in with you in a day or so, and we can just see how things are going. Want to support everyone here for any kind of work you're doing, inner and also outer. And so we need to be community wise that way to really hold each other. Yeah. So we're going to bring closure for tonight, and we'll come back together next Monday. As always, your love offerings are joyfully welcomed. For this program is with the Unity Center of Vancouver, and all your love offerings and donations are so important to keeping the work going and keeping this ministry going and keeping this community united and together. So the link is in your chat box, and please mark that it was for the Monday night course if you do and are able to give. And so without any longer ado, further ado, as I said, we will part for now. Why didn't everybody unmute and say goodbye to one another? And YouTube people, we love you and we miss you. We wish you were here with us on Zoom, but we say bye to you as well. There's Garrett. The man behind the Unity symbol came
Yes.
forward.
Thank you, Garrett.
Yeah.
Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you.
Good to
Yes.
All
see
of
you, everyone.
for joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Lovely to be
Mahalo.
with you.